Rest in peace to the great Fernando Valenzuela.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for a while now, and this is wrapping up my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network, where I also hosted Locked On A's for this season as well. This episode is brought to you by our good friends over at Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Also follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And on Instagram, I'm your pal Sully. That's Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. I can't say the news came as a shock, but that being said, it made it no less sad. The last time Fernando Valenzuela made a public appearance, it was at an event at Dodger Stadium where he was matched alongside many other living Dodger greats. He was certainly there with Sandy Koufax was there, and Clayton Kershaw. There was some. I don't remember what the event was, but it was some event that was happening, and I just remember Fernando was there, and I didn't recognize him. He looked so gone. He looked so thin. Certainly wasn't the kind of the lovable, pudgy dude that he was during his heyday with the Dodgers. And when it was announced that he was not going to be part of the Spanish language broadcast for the Dodgers and was being hospitalized, I think like a lot of people here in Los Angeles County, there was kind of a sense that we were going to get the news at any minute, and it happened late last night. And I came in, as some of you know, I work at a school here in Los Angeles County. And when I came into school, there are several people who are my age or a little bit older. And a lot of the people who work at my school are of Mexican descent. And I saw about 4 or 5 people about my age wearing their Fernando jerseys. I was at Dodger Stadium just the other day, and yes, the primary jersey worn these days is Ohtani, but there are still probably number 2 seems to always be Fernando. And Fernando Valenzuela had an impact on the game, an impact on the Dodgers. But let's just, before we talk about that, let's just point out the fact that he had a wonderful career. For about, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years, he was, I'd say, the best left-hander in the National League. You may throw a name at me here, you may throw a name at me there. You may have this stat to show that I'm wrong. He had one of the most mind-boggling rookie years of all time where he won the Cy Young Award and the Rookie of the Year. He had several other seasons where he certainly had Cy Young caliber years. He was in the top between 1981 and 1986. He was in the top 5 of the Cy Young Award 5 times, finishing in second place behind Mike Scott in 1986. He put together unbelievable numbers of innings, complete games, leading the league in strikeouts as a rookie and several times recording over 200 strikeouts, constantly throwing over 200 innings, super low ERA, and was a durable workhorse and was a big part of the postseason teams in 81, 83, and 85. Now, he was on the 1988 World Series championship team. In fact, he pitched a 4-inning save to clinch the National League West. But he was not on the roster for that year, as he was injured for most of the year, and they included John Tudor instead of Fernando. But for that period of time, for that 6 or 7 year stretch, he was as good as anyone was in baseball. A big game pitcher, He wound up throwing a pair of complete games in the 1981 postseason, pitched great in the 83 NLCS, getting the lone win for the Dodgers that year, and pitched very well in the 85 NLCS, which was, of course, the Go Crazy, Folks Go Crazy championship for the St. Louis Cardinals. He kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the 80s, although he wound up having a decent season in 1990, which featured his lone no-hitter, but was kind of unceremoniously dumped during spring training of 1991. It kind of left a bitter taste in his mouth. And he kind of bounced around a little bit between the Angels and the Mexican League. 1 year in Baltimore, 1 year in Philadelphia. Had a little bit of a renaissance with the San Diego Padres and helped pitch them past the Dodgers. It's a strange, ironic picture I saw of him celebrating as a Padre in Dodger Stadium when they won the division in 1996, and kind of bounced around at the end between the Padres and the Cardinals. And after a little stretch where he was a touch bitter about how things ended with the Dodgers, he eventually was welcomed back into the fold and became one of the Spanish language announcers, and also became like an ambassador for the team, always getting a huge hand when they showed him in the booth there while going to games at Dodger Stadium. That's just the numbers. That's just looking at his stats and his contribution on the field. What he meant for the team was unbelievable. First of all, that 81, it's going to be hard for people to understand the effect of the 81 season that he had. That just out of nowhere, he came up through a shutout on opening day, through shutout after shutout throughout that season, 8 shutouts, and not 8 complete games, 8 shutouts. And that he was doing so with a flourish. He was doing so with a sense of fun. And that he was doing so in an electric way that captured the baseball world, of which they desperately needed that, because there was a strike in the middle of that season. And there was so much ill will going on during the strike that when baseball came back in August, the enthusiasm for Fernando helped heal those wounds. And seeing Fernando come up big time after time, and in the World Series, he came up big despite getting punched in the mouth early by the Yankees, settled down through a complete game victory. Imagine that. You don't start off well, but you adjust and you throw a complete game. It's like a different world back then. And he did so with the sort of aura that he was just a guy. He was a 20-year-old guy, kind of a chubby face, a little bit of a belly. I live in Los Angeles. I see guys like him just hanging out. Just a guy who was working somewhere, see him in the neighborhood, and it looked like he won like a Make-A-Wish contest where he got to put on a Dodger uniform. And instead, he's mowing away batters where they can't hit his screwball. He went from the most obscure prospect in the Dodgers organization to being the biggest name in sports, meeting Ronald Reagan in his rookie year as a 20-year-old, and being permeating our culture that we knew and understand who he was, even if you weren't a big baseball fan. Remember in Bull Durham, it was Fernando Valenzuela, or as Susan Sarandon called him, Fernando, that she taught Nuke to emulate Fernando's pitching style with him moving his eyes up as he pitched. There's behind-the-scenes footage of the making of E.T., where Spielberg is directing Henry Thomas's Elliot how to throw the baseball into the shed where E.T. is hiding. And the direction that Spielberg gave was, be Valenzuela, throw like Valenzuela. He was everywhere. Fernandomania was a gigantic part of Dodgerdom that is still being felt. I'm sure you've seen the articles about this. I'm sure you've read about the fact that the Chavez Ravine was a thriving, predominantly Mexican-American community. And Los Angeles already had a baseball stadium. It was L.A. Wrigley Field, where the minor league Angels played. But the Dodgers refused to play there when they moved to Los Angeles. prior to the Dodgers moving, the land was bought out. People were evicted forcefully with the promise that public housing was going to be built there. They could move back in. But then the new mayor came in, and next thing you know, he was against public housing, and they sold the land to the Dodgers, and everything looked fishy. And the Dodgers became kind of the symbol of oppression and a symbol of divisiveness in Los Angeles. And the Mexican community stayed away from Dodger Stadium in droves until Fernando arrived. And a guy who looked like everyone, looked like a regular guy, talked like a regular guy, had a great sense of humor, played with a sense of, with a flourish of showmanship, took over, and suddenly it became the team for the Mexican-American community. And it's funny, over the years, the Dodgers have kind of taken the mantle of being the team for certain racial and ethnic groups in America. Of course, when Jackie Robinson broke in, they were the team for African Americans. With Fernando Valenzuela, they became the team for the Mexican American community. First with Hideo Nomo, and then now with Shohei Ohtani, they have become the team for the Japanese American community. When Shanho Park was here, drew great crowds of Korean Americans. The great irony is another player who was in the Dodgers farm system was Roberto Clemente, who became the man for the Puerto Rican community. But the Dodgers, thanks to Branch Rickey, saw the Pirates sweep him away. The effect is felt to this day of Fernandomania, and it's nothing you can ever belittle. And it's something, as a guy at school I was talking to was shaking his head, he's not in the Hall of Fame, and people won't understand. People won't understand. And that's true. Future generations aren't going to understand the impact. And people just crunching the numbers are not going to understand the impact that he had. It was not small. It was the concentric circles of that stone being thrown into the lake can be felt to this day. But Fernando represents something more than his effect in Los Angeles, something more than his effect in the box score, something more. He represents in many ways something that baseball can provide our culture in this country. And it's something I don't want us to lose sight of. Hey, let's hear from our friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in award winnings, Prize Picks have made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. Just make your more than or less than pick on at least two players for a shot to win up to 100 times your money in cash. Run your game all season long. Prize Picks is the best way to get on the action in over 30 states, including Florida, Georgia, Texas, and right here in California. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You could double your money even if one of your picks doesn't do that. And Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in as little as 15 minutes. Download the app today and use the code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Now, let me say that again. Download the app, use the code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. This is all part of Prize Picks. Prize Picks! Run your game. You know, you can't tell the story of Fernando Valenzuela without bringing up his mythology. You can't bring up the fact that Fernando is from a small town called Echohuaquila. I don't know if I pronounced that correct, but it is a small town in the Sonora Desert region of Mexico. And from that tiny town emerged, blossomed, seemingly out of nowhere, a superstar whose impact is felt to this day and will be felt beyond his death. Do you know what this is? This is folklore. Baseball at its best can provide moments of folklore, can provide moments of things that seem larger than life, can provide stories that seem like they're fiction. If you put that in a movie, the Los Angeles Dodgers had a pitcher from a tiny town in the middle of nowhere, the desert, that if you saw Close Encounters, that's the desert at the beginning of the film where they find the planes. There's nothing there. And in a tiny little town, some scout found a player who turned into the man who electrified the nation. If you put that in a film, that would be considered over the top. And I don't mean an arm wrestling movie with Stallone. But baseball at its best gives us figures like Babe Ruth, and the stories around Babe Ruth have been exaggerated over the years. Stories about Jackie Robinson have been exaggerated over the years. Of course, the sad thing is the real stories of Ruth and Robinson didn't need the exaggeration, didn't need the folklore, but you find ways to create folklore around certain stories. There's something genuinely American, genuinely human, and genuinely, for the lack of the better word, theatrical. In so many ways, Fernando Valenzuela has more in common with Paul Bunyan than Sandy Koufax. There's something about him that doesn't seem real. The way he looked, he just looked like a guy with his chubby face and his mop top hair and his belly hanging over and his strange delivery, but no one could hit him. And that he did so on the grandest stage and in a World Series in 1981 that featured Reggie Jackson, Dave Winfield, Greg Nettles, Steve Garvey, Davey Lopes. So many superstars were on that team. It was Fernando who shone the brightest. Fernandomania continues to this day, and it seems otherworldly. Baseball at its best can provide folklore. It can provide those stories that we look at and go like, how much of that was true? Well, does it matter? The myth is more fun. The narrative is more fun. Every once in a while, someone shows up that has a sort of mysterious, in a fun way. We don't know everything about them. So we fill in the blanks. This is how our brains are wired. This is how constellations were named and described. We couldn't just see random stars up in the sky. We had to map them out into crabs and bulls, and then tell stories about the crabs and the bulls. And we have figures like Ruth and his origin story coming from St. Mary's Reformatory in Baltimore and coming to Boston, and even his trade has a curse around it. The stories of Jackie Robinson and him being built up and being the great athlete in so many different sports, but being picked by Branch Rickey and not fighting back until he could. And then he was the fiercest competitor of them all. The stories of Clemente, and even more recent stories like El Duque Hernandez coming over on the raft, mysterious, hat down, not speaking much, and then mowing them away when it comes to October. Or Ichiro coming here. Can he hit? Can he hit? And out of the blue, changing the game. Fernando brings around a mythic quality, a quality that seems like fiction. And baseball and sports at its best can provide that. That goes beyond the numbers. That goes beyond the stats. That goes beyond the rings. The stories that you want to tell. I was at that game. and the stories becoming exaggerated. But you know what? We have been embracing exaggeration for centuries. Hell, the origin of baseball, the Hall of Fame, is located in Cooperstown, the city where baseball was not invented. There's no evidence that Abner Doubleday even went to a baseball game, let alone invented it while riding it on the ground with a stick. There are so many things in our history of baseball that has become mythology, and that's part of the fun of it. The great John Thorne, who wrote the book Baseball in the Garden of Eden, which is about the origins of the game, has the quote that the history of baseball has a certain amount of Americana to it and a certain amount of pure fiction. It's part Abraham Lincoln, part P.T. Barnum. But the fiction and the grandiose stories about it are part of the things that make it fun. It's our mythology. It's our Paul Bunyan. It's our Hercules. He's our Fernando. When we come back, sadly, Fernando is not the only left-hander from the 1981 World Series who we lost. Hey, let's hear from our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats and view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. The other left-hander from the 1981 World Series that we lost today may not have had the same impact on Major League Baseball, but is certainly worth a salute here. Rudy May, who was a product of the East Bay. Many of the great players who came out of the East Bay. He went to Castlemont High School in Oakland, and he pitched for 16 wonderful seasons in the major leagues. He died today. And Rudy May is just on paper. He pitched many years with the California Angels, had a couple of stints with the Yankees, pitched a little bit with the Orioles, pitched a little bit with the Expos, and was on the Expos teams when they were starting to finally take the turn. And in 1980, during his second stint with the New York Yankees, he led the league in earned run average, ERA plus, FIP, and WHIP, and was a remarkably durable pitcher. And he was acquired by the Yankees via free agency. He's been was traded around several times in his career, but had a wonderful career. Pitched for the Yankees a complete game in the 1980 playoffs against the Royals. He pitched in both the Division Series and the League Championship Series, and wound up pitching 3 games in the 1981 World Series for the Yankees. As I said, leading the league in the ERA in 1980, in a year where he was not only durable but versatile. He made 41 appearances that year. 17 were starts, and 13 were games that he finished up. So he had, of his 41 starts, he either started or finished 30 of them. Wound up having 3 complete games and 3 saves. He was whatever manager Dick Hauser needed him to do, he did it. And it means a little something to me because back in 2014, I set up an interview with Rudy May on the podcast, the Old Sully Baseball Daily podcast. And he was a guest on the show and did a good hour interview with me, which I broke up into 3 different episodes. And if you follow me on Twitter at Sully Baseball, I've posted those interviews. There was nobody listening to that podcast. I had no audience. And he came on the show, gave me an hour of his time. And if you listened to us talk, you would have assumed we'd known each other for years. Could not have been a kinder or more gentle man. He was a grandfather who just was loving his life as he was living in Central California, and he would go out on his boat. He had invested his money that he earned with the Yankees, and he kind of said to me off the air, said, "I still have my money because I didn't get divorced and I didn't do drugs, so I still got all my money." And he wound up investing his money in grocery stores in Central California and becoming a very wealthy, very well-off man, and had a boat which he would take out and do deep sea fishing. And he would take out former ball players, but he seemed to be a level of happiness that may we all achieve that. And along the way, he had a very fine career where he got to have, he told me about playing for Billy Martin and saying that was a very strange experience, because he was playing with the Yankees when they played in Shea Stadium in '75. And Billy Martin and he clashed, and he wound up being traded to Baltimore, where he pitched for Earl Weaver. And later he pitched for Dick Williams when Dick Williams was the manager of the Expos. But the manager he had the highest praise for was Dick Hauser, who managed the Yankees to the 1980 American League Championship Series. And he was the one they had his finest year with, the aforementioned 1980 season, where he was super versatile and helped pitch the Yankees with his 15-5 record, 2.46 ERA, and pitching out of the bullpen, pitching out of the rotation, and doing anything Dick Hauser needed. Now, he wound up making peace with Billy Martin when Billy returned as the manager in 1983. But he had some funny things to say about playing during the Steinbrenner years, where there was constant turnover. In 1980, when he was playing for the Yankees, the manager was Dick Hauser. In 1981, when he played for the Yankees, the managers were Gene Michael and Bob Lemon. In 1982, the managers were Bob Lemon, Gene Michael, and Clyde King. And in 1983, it was Billy Martin. Lest we forget, that's what George Steinbrenner did. They kept changing managers, kept changing general managers. And apparently, Rudy May would walk into the clubhouse and ask one of the clubhouse attendants, "Who's our manager today?" He had a very gentle voice, and he was a wonderfully generous and kind man who will be missed. Again, type of a pitcher that, the next generation, I'm not sure how many people will remember what he did on the field, but he had a wonderful career. Anyone who can pitch in the major leagues with some very good levels of success over 16 seasons and do so with class and with dignity, Rudy May, you are worth a salute. All right. Well, by the way, my apologies for not doing my tribute to Fernando yesterday. And it's funny, I had Jeff Snyder from Locked On Dodgers on the show. I banked that one early because I had a dental appointment yesterday. And when I came back from the dentist, I saw Fernando Valenzuela had died. And I literally couldn't talk. My mouth was so swollen, my tongue was so swollen, and there was so much Novocaine still in my mouth that I could not do it. So that's my decision to bank an episode so I could have a day back from the dentist and not miss a day here. Well, no good deed goes unpunished. Well, guess what? I'm going to have a new show tomorrow as well. And we're going to be doing a World Series preview because the World Series starts day after tomorrow. So follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter or whatever it's called now. And you can follow me. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Rest in peace to the great Fernando Valenzuela, a man who gave us great numbers, championship years, and a sense of baseball's folklore. And rest in peace, Rudy May, a fine professional who had a wonderful career himself. This has been Locked On MLB. I'm your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.